I thought this vacation would bring us closer together. Instead, it became the breaking point of our marriage. My wife and I had been married for 10 years. Life was good in many ways. We had two beautiful children who were our pride and joy. But over time, something had shifted between us. Like most parents, we were caught in the endless cycle of responsibilities, school runs, work deadlines, doctor appointments, and everything else that came with raising a family. By the time we fell into bed at night, we were too exhausted to talk, let alone connect on a deeper level. Our days felt like they were running on a loop. I'd wake up early to help get the kids ready for school, while my wife handled breakfast. After work, we tag-teamed dinner, homework, and bedtime routines, only to sit silently in front of the TV before calling it a night. Weekends weren't much better, packed with errands and kids' activities. Somewhere in the middle of all this chaos, we had lost us. It wasn't always like this. When we were dating, my wife and I could spend hours talking, laughing, and simply enjoying each other's company. But now, even when we had free time, it felt like we didn't know what to do with it. Conversations had turned into discussions about bills, or who would take the kids to soccer practice. That's when I suggested the vacation. A break from the routine seemed like exactly what we needed. No kids, no work, just the two of us reconnecting. I pictured long walks on the beach, candlelit dinners, and lazy mornings where we could finally talk without interruptions. I believed this trip could help us remember why we fell in love in the first place. She agreed without hesitation. Maybe she felt the distance too, or maybe she just wanted a change of scenery. Whatever the reason, we booked a tropical getaway, a chance to hit reset on our relationship. I was hopeful, even excited, that this trip could bring us closer. We arrived at the resort early in the morning. The warm sun, the sound of waves crashing against the shore, and the laughter of carefree tourists filled the air. The beach was breathtaking, white sand stretching for miles and crystal-clear water glimmering under the sunlight. For a moment, it felt like the perfect escape. Our first day was filled with small joys. We walked hand in hand along the shoreline, letting the waves wash over our feet. She giggled when a small crab scurried past her toes, and I couldn't help but smile. It was the first time in weeks I'd heard her laugh like that. At dinner, we shared a table overlooking the ocean as the sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. We talked about how much we needed this break. It felt good, like we were starting to connect. But even amidst the smiles and laughter, I noticed the cracks. She spent more time on her phone than I liked, scrolling through social media or texting friends. When I asked her to join me for a sunrise walk the next morning, she shrugged it off, saying she needed to catch up on sleep. It wasn't a big deal, but it stung. In those quiet moments, when we weren't distracted by the beauty around us, the distance between us became more obvious. I caught her staring off into the distance more than once, her face thoughtful, almost wistful. When I asked her what she was thinking about, she brushed it off with a vague, nothing important. I didn't press her, but deep down, I wondered if she was as invested in this trip as I was. Still, I held on to hope. After all, we were here to rebuild what felt broken, to remember why we fell in love in the first place. I told myself these small moments of distance didn't mean anything, that they were just a byproduct of the busy lives we'd been leading. This vacation would help us find each other again. Or so I believed. But sometimes, when you ignore the cracks, they only get bigger. I was about to learn that no amount of sunsets or sandy beaches could fix what was already slipping away. One evening, the beach came alive with energy, a perfect blend of chaos and joy. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting an orange glow over the ocean waves. The air buzzed with vibrant sounds, rhythmic Afro-Caribbean beats blaring from speakers, the crash of waves against the shore, and bursts of laughter from the crowd gathered for the night's festivities. Vendors moved through the throng, shouting out offers for cold drinks and snacks, their colorful carts adding to the lively scene. At the heart of the activity was a makeshift stage near the water, surrounded by tiki torches flickering in the warm evening breeze. The announcer, microphone in hand, hyped up the crowd, calling for participants in a dance competition. A semicircle of onlookers cheered as volunteers stepped forward, eager to show off their moves. Among them stood my wife, her face lit with the same excitement that had first drawn me to her years ago. She'd always loved dancing, and tonight was no different. She leaned toward me, her eyes sparkling. "I want to do it," she said, almost like a child asking for permission. Before I could answer, she slipped off her sandals and stepped forward toward the stage. I didn't think much of it at first. She always loved moments like this, being in the spotlight, soaking in the crowd's energy. That was just her way. I stayed back, settling into my seat with a drink in hand, watching as she navigated the crowd with her usual eager smile. The announcer greeted her warmly, handing her a numbered sash to tie around her waist. The crowd erupted in cheers as she climbed onto the stage, her excitement lighting up the atmosphere. I chuckled softly. Typical of her. Never one to sit still when there was fun to be had. Part of me admired her confidence, the way she could throw herself into the moment without hesitation. Another part of me, the quieter side, preferred to watch from a distance. I didn't mind. I was content letting her enjoy herself while I stayed in the background. It was her face that lit up first when the announcer called for participants in a local dance competition. At first, I thought it was just another fun activity, part of the vacation we planned to reconnect and escape life stressors. Then, her dance partner appeared. He was young, charismatic, with a confident stride and an easy smile. His tan skin and athletic build suggested a life spent by the ocean or on the field. His movements were smooth, assured, as though he belonged on the dance floor. He introduced himself with a playful bow that made her giggle. She gave him her hand, and in that instant, it was like I ceased to exist. They began to dance, and I watched as he twirled her effortlessly, drawing laughter and blushes. She looked carefree, alive in a way I hadn't seen in years. For a brief moment, I thought, maybe this is good for her. She deserves to have fun, but as the dance continued, an uneasy knot formed in my stomach. The way he held her waist, the way she leaned into him, it was too much. I clapped along with the rest of the crowd, but inside, I felt out of place, alienated. The cheerful music mocked me, each lingering touch and laugh cutting deeper. It wasn't just about the dance. It was about all the unspoken cracks in our marriage, the distance, the silence, her constant need for validation from others instead of from me. When the music ended, the crowd roared with applause, but I felt only anger. As they bowed and exchanged smiles, I knew I had to say something. I walked up to her, striving for calm, and said, "Can we talk for a minute?" She frowned but followed me a few steps away from the crowd. My frustration bubbled over. "What are you doing out there?" I asked, my voice trembling. "This doesn't feel right. I think you should stop." Her expression shifted from confusion to defiance. "What's the big deal?" she snapped. "It's just a dance. We're on vacation. Can't I have a little fun?" I tried to explain how it made me feel, but she didn't seem to care. Her tone turned sharper. "We're married, but you don't own me. You're not going to tell me what to do?" Her words hit me like a slap. I wasn't trying to control her. I just wanted her to see how much it hurt me. But in that moment, I realized she didn't care. This wasn't just about the dance. It was about how far we'd drifted apart, how little she valued our bond. I swallowed hard and said, "If you go back out there and dance with him again, you won't find me here when you come back." She laughed as if I were joking, then turned and walked away. The music started again, and I stood there, frozen, watching her spin and laugh with a stranger. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. Our marriage had been broken for years. I turned and walked back to the hotel, my steps heavy with the weight of finality. In the silence of our room, I packed my things, my hands moving mechanically. I booked a taxi to the airport, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at my suitcase. I wasn't just leaving the trip. I was leaving behind a life, a dream, and the woman I once believed was my forever. For the first time in a long time, I felt clarity. Sometimes, letting go is the only way to find yourself again. When she returned to an empty house, the reality hit her harder than my words ever could. She called, confused and irritated, not understanding why I couldn't just come back and pretend everything was fine. But it wasn't just about the dance or the stranger. It was about years of feeling invisible, about cracks too deep to repair. Eventually, her calls stopped. Maybe she started to accept it. As for me, I realized I couldn't keep fighting for something already lost. Sometimes, love isn't enough to save a marriage. Leaving her wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And as painful as it was also a chance for both of us to start anew. Sometimes, the hardest goodbyes are the ones that set us free.